They are
"Cowboy, do
coming
you
for
fear
you,
me or desire
cowboy.
me?" she asked,
You need to
alone
ride
in the
now
desert
if you want
night.
to live.
Stars twinkled like tiny lanterns, scattered across the sky, and a gentle wind whispered through the dunes. Ava urged her horse forward, the soft sound of hooves crunching against sand the only companion to her thoughts. The desert had always called to her, not for its beauty alone, but for its ability to offer silence, a place where she could hear herself think. She had been running for days, though she wasn't entirely sure from what. Memories of a failed relationship, of promises broken, of moments lost, these haunted her in the quiet of night. And so she had ridden, deeper into the endless desert, searching for clarity and maybe even a hint of peace. Her horse, a sturdy chestnut named Willow, moved with a rhythm that had become familiar to her. Every step, every shift in the sand beneath the hooves was a reminder that life, like the desert, moved forward regardless of what she felt. The horizon was dark, almost blending with the sand in the dim light of the moon, and for a long moment she felt the loneliness settle deep into her bones. There was a freedom in that solitude, yes, but also an unease, as if the desert itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Suddenly, from somewhere ahead, she noticed a flicker of light. At first, she thought it was a trick of her tired eyes, but as she drew closer, the faint glow became clearer. A small fire, barely bigger than a lantern's glow, dancing in the desert wind. Curiosity stirred in her, mixed with caution. Travelers were rare in this part of the desert, and strangers rarer still. Yet something about the fire pulled her forward, a sense that perhaps fate, or sheer coincidence, was about to intervene. She slowed Willow to a careful trot, scanning the surrounding dunes. The night air was crisp, carrying the scent of dry sand and distant sagebrush. When she reached the fire, she saw him. He was a man, dressed in worn denim and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed most of his face. A cowboy, though unlike any she had seen in stories or movies. His boots were dusty, his hands calloused, and yet there was a calmness about him that spoke of years spent surviving the harsh desert. He was crouched near the fire, tending to it with a methodical precision, stirring the embers gently with a stick. For a moment, he didn't notice her approach. She could see the lines on his face, the faint scars that told of hard years, and something about him made her pause. He was both part of the desert and separate from it, a figure that seemed as permanent and unmovable as the dunes themselves. Ava stopped a few meters away, unsure whether to speak or retreat. Her horse shifted nervously beneath her, sensing her tension. Finally, she cleared her throat, a soft sound that carried over the quiet desert night. The man's head snapped up, eyes narrowing as he assessed her. There was a moment of silence, a delicate tension that hung between them. It was the kind of silence that could either lead to connection or fear, depending on how it was broken. "You lost?" he asked finally, his voice low but steady, like the gravel of the desert itself. Ava shook her head. "Not exactly," she replied. I just needed to be somewhere quiet." She didn't add that the desert was more than quiet, it was lonely, and that loneliness had followed her like a shadow she couldn't escape. He studied her for a long moment. "Quiet can be dangerous out here," he said. "The desert doesn't forgive mistakes." She nodded, understanding his warning but feeling no fear. Perhaps it was foolish, perhaps it was brave, but something about him made the desert feel less empty. "I can handle myself," she said. There was a hint of a smile on his lips, though he didn't fully reveal it. "Maybe," he said, "or maybe you just like to test the desert's patience." Ava laughed softly, the sound breaking the tension, though it quickly returned as he glanced around. "I've been riding all day," she said. "I didn't expect to find anyone here." He gestured to the fire. "Not many come here. Most are either lost or looking for something they won't find. Sit if you like. There's room." Hesitating for only a moment, Ava dismounted and led Willow to a safe distance. The fire warmed her chilled fingers, and she felt a strange sense of comfort in the flickering light. She looked at the cowboy, noting the way he moved, deliberate, careful, as if every motion was part of a ritual he had practiced 1,000 times. The desert had shaped him, just as it had shaped her journey, though in very different ways. They didn't speak much at first, letting the crackling fire fill the silence. Ava found herself observing him, noticing small details, the way his eyes reflected the flames, the faint tension in his shoulders, the way he seemed both wary and welcoming at once. He, in turn, studied her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. There was something unspoken between them, a connection forged by circumstance, curiosity, and the harsh beauty of the desert night. After a while, she found herself sharing fragments of her story. Not everything, just pieces that felt safe. She spoke of her past heartbreak, of the loneliness that had driven her into the desert, of the strange mixture of fear and hope that now guided her steps. He listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally, offering quiet understanding rather than advice. There was a weight in his silence, a suggestion that he too had known loss, that he too had walked through nights much darker than this one. As hours passed, the conversation shifted from past regrets to present observations. They spoke of the stars overhead, of the patterns of the dunes, of the way the desert seemed to have a life of its own. Ava realized she was laughing more freely now, her earlier tension melting into a strange sense of camaraderie. And yet, despite the warmth of fire and conversation, there remained a subtle tension in the air, a question neither of them had yet dared to voice. Who was this stranger, really? And why did it feel like she had stumbled into something far bigger than a chance encounter? At one point, Daniel, the cowboy, stood and stretched, his movements graceful and unhurried. He looked at Ava, something unreadable in his gaze, before returning to tend the fire. "It's dangerous to stay out here too long," he said softly. "Not just because of the night, but because the desert has a way of teaching lessons to those who linger." Ava nodded, unsure whether he meant to warn her or to hint at something else. "I think I like learning from the desert," she said, her voice a mixture of defiance and curiosity. He glanced at her, the corner of his mouth twitching into what might have been a smile. "Then maybe you're braver than most," he replied, "or maybe just reckless. Only time will tell." The night grew colder and the wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of distant sand and sage. Ava felt the weight of exhaustion pressing on her, yet she didn't want to leave. There was something compelling about this stranger, something that made her forget the loneliness that had brought her here. She realized, with a mix of surprise and apprehension, that the desert night had begun to feel less empty, less intimidating. When she finally settled down beside the fire, she watched him quietly. The cowboy was a mystery, and the desert itself seemed to have drawn them together for reasons she did not yet understand. The stars above sparkled, indifferent to the small, human drama unfolding beneath them, yet somehow the vastness of the night felt like a witness to this fragile connection. Ava's mind wandered, thinking of what the next day might bring, of how this encounter could change the direction of her journey, and whether she was ready to face what might lie ahead. For the first time in days, she allowed herself a sense of calm. The desert had been silent and lonely, but tonight, by the light of a small fire and in the company of a man she barely knew, it had become a place of possibility. Somewhere in the darkness, beyond the dunes and beyond the firelight, she sensed that her journey was only just beginning. And as she drifted toward a restless sleep beside Willow, the question lingered in her mind. What did this stranger see in her, and what did she see in him? The answer, she knew, would come, but not tonight. Tonight, the desert belonged to the stars, to the fire, and to the quiet beginnings of a story neither of them could yet fully understand. The first light of dawn painted the desert in soft shades of pink and gold. Ava stirred, her horse Willow nuzzling her hand as if waking her from a shared dream. The fire from the night before had burned down to glowing embers, and Daniel was already awake, tending to a new fire, his movements calm and deliberate. The quiet of morning held a different weight than the night, lighter, warmer, yet still filled with possibility and caution. Ava could feel the tension from last night lingering, a subtle thread connecting them, fragile but undeniable. She mounted Willow slowly, careful not to disturb the quiet. Daniel watched her with a steady gaze, silent but observant. "The desert changes in the morning," he said finally, his voice low but carrying easily in the still air. "It's softer, less dangerous, but no less honest." Ava nodded, not entirely sure what he meant. She had always believed the desert reflected life itself, sometimes harsh, sometimes beautiful, always honest. "I've never been anywhere like this," she admitted. "It feels alive." Daniel gave a small smile, almost imperceptible. "It does, you just have to know how to listen." They rode together, not far apart, across the rising dunes. The morning sun reflected off the sand, creating a haze that made the desert seem endless. For hours they moved in silence, the only sound the soft clop of hooves and the wind brushing across the dunes. The silence was not uncomfortable. Instead, it was a space where thoughts could settle, where unspoken feelings could form without pressure. Ava felt strangely at ease in Daniel's presence, though there was still a quiet intensity in his gaze that made her heart race. By midday, they came upon a small oasis, a patch of green in the otherwise golden desert. A few palm trees swayed gently, and a clear pool of water reflected the bright sky above. Ava dismounted, letting Willow drink first, then kneeling to wash her hands in the cool water. Daniel joined her, crouching beside the pool, careful not to touch more than necessary. "You ride like you know what you're doing," he said, breaking the silence. "Not many women come out here alone, and even fewer know how to survive." Ava shrugged, trying to hide a smile. "I've had practice. I guess I like being out here where the rules are simple." "You move, you survive, you rest." Daniel nodded slowly. "Simple, yes, but not easy. The desert tests you in ways most people never see." She looked at him, curious. "Has it tested you?" For a long moment he didn't answer. Then he said quietly, "More than I'd like to admit." "But that's the thing about the desert, it strips everything away. Pretenses, fears, mistakes. You either face them or you get lost." Ava considered his words. There was something in his voice, a hint of pain, of experience, that made her realize Daniel carried stories she would never guess at. Yet despite that, he was calm, grounded, and alive in a way that fascinated her. She felt drawn to him, not just because of his presence, but because the desert seemed to have shaped him into someone honest and unyielding, someone who could endure its tests without complaint. As the afternoon sun climbed higher, they continued riding, following tracks in the sand that led to nowhere and everywhere at once. Ava found herself opening up more, sharing pieces of her own story that she had kept buried. She spoke of her childhood in a small town, of the expectations she had tried to escape, of the heartbreak that had driven her into the desert. Daniel listened, his face unreadable but attentive, occasionally nodding or offering a short comment. "You've carried a lot," he said finally. "It shows, but you're stronger than you think." Ava felt a warmth in his words, something she hadn't expected from a stranger. "And you," she asked softly, "you seem like you've carried your own burdens." Daniel glanced away toward the distant dunes. "Everyone has burdens," he said. "Some just learn to hide them better than others." There was a pause, a quiet moment where the desert itself seemed to hold its breath. Ava sensed the unspoken stories behind his words, the experiences that had shaped him into the man sitting beside her. Yet she didn't press. Some truths, she understood, could only be revealed in their own time. The ride continued into the evening, and the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the sand. Ava felt a strange mixture of exhilaration and unease. The desert was beautiful, yes, but it was also unpredictable. She had encountered storms before, sudden and fierce, and the thought of being caught unprepared reminded her of her own vulnerability. Yet with Daniel beside her, that fear was tempered, replaced with a cautious trust. At one point, Willow stumbled on a hidden rock and Ava almost lost her balance. Daniel reacted immediately, reaching out to steady her. Their hands brushed briefly, and a spark of tension passed between them, brief, electric, and impossible to ignore. Ava felt her pulse quicken, a mix of fear, excitement, and curiosity swirling in her chest. She pulled back slightly, aware of the moment but not wanting to push it away. "You okay?" Daniel asked, his voice steady but softer than before. Ava nodded, her cheeks warming. "I am now," she said lightly, though her voice carried a hint of something more. They made camp again as night approached. The desert night was different from the previous one, quieter, calmer, yet still filled with an undercurrent of energy. Daniel tended the fire while Ava unpacked her supplies. The smell of burning wood and dry sand filled the air, mingling with the faint scent of her horse and the desert plants. As they sat near the fire, Daniel studied her quietly. "You have a way of facing things most people would run from," he said. "I can see it in the way you move and the way you speak. There's something about you." Ava felt her heart skip a beat. "Something about me," she repeated softly, trying to sound casual. He shrugged slightly, avoiding her gaze. "I don't know what it is exactly. Maybe courage, maybe curiosity, or maybe it's just that you're different from everyone else I've met out here." She smiled faintly, unsure how to respond. "I guess the desert brings out things in people," she said finally. "Some better, some stranger." Daniel nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. There was a shared understanding in that silence, a recognition that they were both outsiders in their own ways, both shaped by past experiences and the solitude of the desert. As the night deepened, Ava found herself drawn into conversation again. They spoke of stars, of the desert's secrets, of small joys and fears. Each word, each shared glance built a quiet connection between them. There was still tension, an unspoken question that hovered between them, but it was no longer uncomfortable. Instead, it was charged with curiosity, with the possibility of something more. Eventually, exhaustion settled over them. Ava lay near the fire, staring at the stars, listening to the soft rustle of the wind. Daniel remained nearby, tending to the embers, his presence steady and reassuring. She felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years, a fragile, delicate peace that came not from escaping her past, but from being here in this moment, with someone who seemed to understand, even without words. And though she didn't yet know the answer to the question that lingered in her heart, about fear, desire, trust, or connection, she sensed that the desert night had begun to reveal its truths. Some lessons were slow, unfolding like the dunes themselves, and she was ready to see where this journey and this strange, compelling cowboy would lead her next. Night had returned to the desert, but this time it was different. The sky stretched endlessly above, filled with stars that shone brighter than Ava had ever seen, each one reflecting in the soft waves of sand beneath her horse's hooves. The air was cooler now, crisp and dry, carrying the faint scent of sage and distant wildflowers. Ava rode slowly, feeling the rhythm of Willow beneath her, the horse's movements steady and familiar, a silent companion in the vast emptiness. Tonight, something in the air felt heavier, charged with anticipation, as if the desert itself was aware of the unspoken tension between her and Daniel. They had spent the day riding together again, speaking in careful, measured words. Conversations flowed more easily than before, yet there was always that invisible wall between them, an invisible line neither dared to cross. Ava could feel it, the pull of curiosity, the attraction tempered by caution. Daniel's eyes followed her constantly, yet he remained reserved, as if he were guarding some private truth, some secret buried deep within him. Finally, as they reached a gentle rise overlooking a vast expanse of dunes, Ava stopped. The moon had risen high, casting silver light over the desert, and the fire from their small campsite below flickered like a distant ember. She dismounted, letting Willow graze nearby while she leaned on the wooden saddle, her thoughts spinning. She had waited for this moment. Tonight, under the desert sky, she would confront the tension, the uncertainty that had grown between them over days of quiet observation and shared silence. Daniel remained on his horse a few meters away, watching her with that same steady intensity. He did not approach, but his presence was undeniable, like gravity pulling her toward him without force. Ava's heart raced. She took a deep breath, feeling the desert night settle around her like a cloak. "Daniel," she called softly, her voice barely above the whisper of the wind. He dismounted immediately, his movements deliberate, careful. His eyes, dark and steady, held her gaze as if he had been waiting for her to speak. "Yes," he asked, his tone measured, calm, yet carrying a quiet curiosity that matched her own. Ava stepped closer, feeling the tension in her chest grow. I need to know something," she said, her voice trembling slightly despite her attempt to sound confident. "I need to know if you fear me or desire me." The words hung in the air, bold and raw, exposed to the wide-open desert and the countless stars above. Daniel's breath caught slightly. For the first time he seemed unsure, as if the question had cut through the careful mask he wore. He remained silent for a long moment, studying her, searching for some hint in her expression, some truth behind her voice. Ava stood still, steadying herself, aware that this was a turning point, that the answer would change everything between them for better or worse. Finally he spoke, his voice quiet but deliberate. "It's neither simple nor easy to answer," he said. "There are parts of me that fear and parts that desire. Fear because the desert teaches hard lessons, because trust is earned slowly, and because I've been hurt before. Desire because, well, because there's something about you. Something alive and untamed that calls to me, and I can't ignore it." Ava's heart raced. She had expected tension, perhaps even rejection, but not this delicate balance of honesty. She took a step closer, closing some of the space between them, and noticed the faint lines of tension in his jaw, the way his eyes flickered in the firelight from below. "I'm not here to hurt you," she said softly. "I'm here because I wanted to see what this could be. Whatever it is." Daniel's gaze softened slightly, though the shadow of caution remained. "And what is this exactly?" he asked. "Is it curiosity? Is it loneliness? Or something deeper that we both don't understand yet?" Ava hesitated. She didn't have the answers, not fully. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I want to find out. With you, if you'll let me." The cowboy studied her for a long time, the silence stretching as the desert night held its breath. Then he nodded slowly, as if making a decision, a quiet acceptance of vulnerability. "Then we start there," he said finally, "with honesty, with the truth, whatever it may be." For a while they simply stood there, listening to the soft wind and the distant howl of a coyote. Ava felt a strange mix of relief and excitement, the tension transforming into something more tender, more intimate. She realized that this moment, the quiet acknowledgement of fear and desire, was what made all the other moments in the desert meaningful. It was not just the vastness of the land or the beauty of the stars, but the connection between two people who had wandered into the same place, drawn together by circumstance and curiosity. Daniel finally spoke again, his voice low, thoughtful. "You have a way of facing things most people would shy away from," he said. That scares me in a way, but it also draws me closer. There's honesty in you, even when you don't know it yourself." Ava smiled faintly, feeling a warmth in her chest she had not experienced in a long time. "And you?" she asked gently. "Are you honest, or are you just careful?" He paused, then met her gaze fully, a mixture of vulnerability and strength in his eyes. "I try to be honest," he said, "but I've built walls to keep the desert and people alike at a distance. You've managed to make me question if I should tear them down." Her breath caught. That was more than she had hoped for. She took another small step closer, feeling the pull between them grow stronger. "I don't want to break you," she said softly. "I just want to understand you, to know you, and maybe to let you know me too." Daniel's lips curved slightly, a faint smile that touched only the edges of his mouth. "Then perhaps we are at the beginning of something neither of us expected," he said. "The desert brings people together in strange ways, and maybe that's what this is, a beginning." For the first time, Ava allowed herself to feel hope. She had entered the desert seeking answers, seeking solitude, but she had found connection. The desert, harsh and lonely, had created a space for honesty and vulnerability, for desire and trust, and for the quiet recognition that fear could exist alongside longing. They spent the rest of the night talking, sharing fragments of their pasts, their fears and their hopes. Every word, every glance built a bridge across the space that had existed between them. The desert listened silently, the stars above shining like guardians of their fragile new connection. At one point, Daniel stood and moved closer, his presence steadying and warm. Ava did not flinch. She had come to this moment ready to confront uncertainty, ready to face the tension that had grown over days. And now that he was near, she felt the strange, exhilarating thrill of possibility. "I don't know what tomorrow will bring," Daniel said quietly. "But tonight, I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad we spoke the truth." Ava nodded, her heart full. "Me too," she said softly. "Whatever comes, we face it honestly." The desert night stretched around them, filled with stars, wind, and the quiet rhythm of two people discovering each other. And in that moment, Ava realized that desire and fear could coexist, that vulnerability could be powerful, and that connection, even in the most isolated, unforgiving places, was possible. She watched Daniel for a long moment, seeing not just the cowboy shaped by the desert, but the man beneath. The man who had carried burdens, who had built walls, and who now, for reasons neither fully understood, was willing to let someone see beyond them. And as the night deepened, Ava felt a sense of peace, tinged with excitement and anticipation. The desert had been both her refuge and her challenge, and now it had become the stage for something new, a beginning that was uncertain, thrilling, and deeply alive. The stars above seemed to shimmer brighter, reflecting the possibilities of what could come. And somewhere deep inside, Ava knew that this moment, this night, would change the course of both their lives forever. The desert morning arrived slowly, painting the dunes in shades of gold and amber. Ava awoke to the quiet rustle of willow moving nearby, and the faint smell of burnt wood still lingering from last night's fire. Daniel was awake too, sitting a short distance away, tending to the small embers left from the night before. He didn't speak immediately, only watching the horizon, his posture calm yet tense. Ava noticed the subtle lines of thought across his face and realized that, while they had shared honesty the night before, life outside the desert, and even their own pasts, still lingered heavily on their minds. Today would not be easy. The desert was beautiful, but it was also relentless, a place that reflected life's challenges in stark clarity. As they prepared to ride, Ava felt a mixture of excitement and unease. The connection they had formed the night before was strong, yet fragile. Trust, she realized, was something that could be tested in an instant, especially when two people carried past wounds so deep that even honesty might not be enough to bridge them completely. They rode in silence for a long while, following paths through the dunes that twisted and turned, always revealing new vistas of shimmering sand. The sun climbed higher, and with it, the heat began to press down, making the desert feel heavier. Ava noticed Daniel's eyes flickering constantly, scanning the horizon, but also returning to her occasionally. His vigilance was natural, she understood, shaped by years of living alone in a harsh world. But she also sensed a quiet struggle, as if he were weighing the risk of opening himself fully to her against the fear of being hurt again. By midday, they reached a rocky plateau overlooking a deep valley. Ava dismounted and let Willow graze while she stretched her legs, taking in the sweeping view. Daniel stood a short distance away, arms crossed loosely over his chest, gazing into the valley as though seeing something only he could understand. Ava approached cautiously, unsure whether to speak first or let him be. "You've been quiet," she said finally, her voice gentle. "Thinking." He turned his gaze to her, eyes dark and thoughtful. "Always thinking," he said. "About the desert, about survival, about the people who wander into it, and about myself." Ava nodded, understanding more than he could imagine. "I know that feeling," she said softly. "I've spent so much time running, thinking I could escape myself. But the desert, it doesn't let you run from what's inside you. It only makes it clearer." Daniel gave a small, approving nod. "Exactly. It shows who you are, whether you like it or not. And sometimes it asks questions you don't want to answer." Ava looked at him, sensing the weight behind his words. "Questions like what?" she asked. He hesitated, then admitted, "Questions about trust, about attachment, about whether letting someone in is worth the risk of losing them. I've carried too many losses." "That fear doesn't go away." Her chest tightened with empathy. She knew that fear well, had felt it in her own life many times. "I understand," she said. "I carry it too, but maybe the point isn't to avoid it, but to face it." He studied her for a long moment, as if trying to gauge whether she truly meant it. Then slowly he said, "Perhaps, but facing fear doesn't make it easier. It just makes it yours to deal with." They rode onward, and the tension between them, though unspoken, grew heavier. The desert seemed to mirror their emotions, shifting from soft gold to harsh orange, the sun beating down with relentless intensity. Ava felt herself tiring, not just physically but emotionally, as the weight of her own fears collided with Daniel's. Every glance, every small gesture between them was charged with unspoken questions. Could they trust each other fully? Could they let down their walls completely, or would the desert's harsh truths drive them apart? By late afternoon, they arrived at a narrow canyon. The walls of rock rose steeply on either side, casting long shadows that created pockets of shade. Ava dismounted again, leading Willow slowly, feeling the cool rock beneath her fingers. Daniel followed, his eyes scanning every crevice, alert to the desert's hidden dangers. The canyon was beautiful, yet imposing, a place that required caution and attention. It was also symbolic, Ava thought, of their situation, narrow, challenging, and requiring careful navigation to avoid harm. As they moved deeper into the canyon, a sudden gust of wind kicked up, lifting sand into the air and stinging their faces. Willow shied slightly, and Ava grabbed the reins tightly to steady her. Daniel moved closer instinctively, his presence protective, though not forceful. "The desert always reminds you," he said softly, "that nothing is guaranteed. You must be prepared for sudden change." Ava nodded, taking in his words. "Change is scary," she admitted, "especially when it's unexpected." He looked at her, eyes meeting hers fully for the first time that day. "And yet it's also necessary. Without it, we never grow. We never learn who we truly are or what we're capable of." For a moment, they walked side by side in silence, the sand crunching softly beneath their boots. Ava felt a strange mixture of fear and hope, understanding that the desert's harshness was not only physical but emotional. It forced confrontation of fears, desires, and truths that could not be ignored. And in that confrontation, she realized they had a choice. They could retreat into safety, keeping walls between them, or they could embrace the uncertainty, face their fears together, and perhaps discover something far more meaningful. As evening approached, the canyon opened into a wide plain, the sun setting in a blaze of red and gold. Ava and Daniel stopped to rest, letting Willow graze while they sat on the sand. The silence between them was comfortable now, but also heavy with reflection. Both of them knew that the connection they had forged in the desert was strong, yet it was still being tested by their inner struggles and past wounds. "You know," Ava said finally, breaking the quiet, "we've been through a lot these past few days. But I feel like we're just beginning to understand each other, and I wonder if that understanding is enough to survive the challenges ahead." Daniel turned to her, his expression serious. "Understanding is a start," he said slowly, "but it's not everything. Trust and patience, those are what we need, and even then there will be moments when doubt creeps in. That's inevitable." Ava looked at him, feeling the weight of his words but also the strength behind them. "I'm willing to try," she said softly. "To face the doubts, the fears, if you are too." He gave her a long, steady look, then nodded. "I am," he said quietly, "but it won't be easy. The desert will test us, and so will life itself. We must be ready for that." The sun finally dipped below the horizon, and the desert shifted into the deep blues and purples of night. They built a small fire together, the act of working side by side bringing a sense of calm. Ava noticed that despite the challenges of the day, despite the tension and fear, there was also growth, something fragile yet undeniable building between them. They had faced parts of themselves today, their fears and uncertainties, and survived. That survival, she realized, was the first step toward something deeper. As they sat near the fire, Daniel spoke again, his voice quieter, more reflective. "The desert teaches many lessons," he said. "Some are harsh, some are gentle. But the most important ones, they come from facing fear and choosing to move forward anyway. That's what we've done today, and I believe it's what will carry us further if we let it." Ava felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of gratitude and hope. "Then we keep going," she said softly, "together, even when it's hard." Daniel nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. "Together," he echoed. And as the desert night deepened around them, filled with stars and the soft whisper of the wind, Ava realized that the journey was far from over. The connection they had formed, though tested by fear and past wounds, was growing stronger, shaped by the challenges they faced and the choices they made. The desert, once a place of solitude and reflection, had become a crucible for their bond, a place where fear and desire, trust and uncertainty all mingled, and where the future, though unknown, felt possible. For the first time in days, Ava felt a sense of resilience. She had faced fear today, not just in the desert but within herself, and within the fragile bond she was forming with Daniel. And in that facing, she realized that love, trust, and connection were not simple. They were earned through courage, patience, and the willingness to confront the unknown. The desert night stretched around them, dark and infinite, yet full of promise. And in that infinite space, Ava and Daniel sat together, ready to face whatever came next, knowing that the journey would test them, shape them, and perhaps, in time, reveal the depth of what they had begun to discover about each other. The desert morning arrived quietly, with a soft glow of pale gold spreading across the horizon. Ava woke to the gentle rustling of willow as the horse grazed nearby. The wind was light, carrying the faint aroma of sage and warm sand. She looked across the dunes and saw Daniel already awake, moving slowly among the small embers from last night's fire. The world around them was serene, almost fragile, yet the lessons of the past days weighed heavily on both of them. They had shared confessions, tested trust, and faced fears together, but the question of what came next lingered like the horizon, endless, uncertain, yet full of possibility. Ava mounted Willow with care, the horse shifting beneath her as she guided it toward Daniel. He turned, acknowledging her presence with a soft nod, his eyes reflecting both warmth and caution. Neither spoke at first. Words were not necessary. The silence between them was familiar now, a companion to the quiet rhythm of the desert. Yet beneath the calm, there was tension, a mixture of hope, desire, and the lingering fear of losing something fragile and precious. They rode side by side, following the dunes as they rolled and shifted under the rising sun. Each movement seemed deliberate, careful, as if the desert itself were guiding their journey. The events of the past days replayed in Ava's mind. The nights by the fire, the long rides, the moments when their hands brushed, and the words spoken under the stars. She realized that every step they had taken together had brought them closer, yet each had also tested the walls they carried inside. The desert had a way of revealing truths people often tried to ignore, and for Ava and Daniel, those truths were both frightening and exhilarating. By midday, they reached a plateau overlooking a broad valley, the sun reflecting off the sand in brilliant waves. Ava dismounted, letting Willow graze, and turned to Daniel, who was already observing the horizon. "We've been through a lot," she said softly, breaking the quiet. "The desert isn't just a place, is it? It's a mirror. It shows what's inside us, what we're capable of, and what we're afraid of." Daniel's gaze remained fixed on the valley, but his voice was thoughtful. "Exactly, and sometimes it forces you to make choices you'd rather avoid. Choices about trust, about desire, about whether you're willing to let someone see the parts of you you've hidden for years." Ava stepped closer, the wind brushing her hair across her face. "I'm willing," she said quietly. "I don't know what the future holds, and I don't know if the desert has more tests for us, but I want to face it with you." Daniel finally turned to her, his dark eyes holding hers fully for the first time that morning. There was a pause, a long, almost unbearable silence where words were unnecessary. Then he nodded, slowly, deliberately, as if sealing an unspoken promise. "Then we face it," he said. "Together. Whatever comes, we face it together." The words hung in the air, carried by the gentle wind, and Ava felt her heart lift with a mixture of relief and excitement. For days, they had tested each other's patience, courage, and trust. They had faced fears both real and imagined, and now, with honesty spoken and desires acknowledged, there was a fragile understanding between them, a bond strengthened by the desert itself. As they prepared to ride further, a sense of calm settled over Ava. The challenges of the past days had been difficult, but they had also been transformative. She realized that the desert had stripped away pretenses, revealing the core of who they were. Daniel, for all his ruggedness and quiet strength, had shown vulnerability. And she, for all her courage and independence, had revealed her longing and her desire to connect. Together, they had begun to navigate the delicate balance between fear and trust, between longing and restraint. The afternoon passed with quiet moments of connection, guiding their horses over dunes, pausing to drink from a hidden spring, observing the way the light shifted across the desert. Every glance, every subtle gesture spoke volumes. There was laughter now, soft and genuine, mingling with the natural sounds of the desert. The wind, the distant cries of birds, the crunch of hooves in the sand. The tension that had defined their first encounters was still there, but it had transformed into something warmer, more resilient. As evening approached, the desert sky turned brilliant shades of orange and purple. They stopped on a high dune, overlooking a valley filled with shadows and gold. Ava dismounted and watched the sun slowly dip toward the horizon. The moment felt sacred, a pause in time where the past struggles seemed distant, replaced by possibility and hope. Daniel approached, standing a few feet away, his presence steady and comforting. "It's beautiful," he said quietly. "The desert, the sky, and the way it makes you see what matters." Ava nodded, feeling a lump of emotion in her throat. "I think I've learned a lot here," she said softly, "about myself, about trust, and about what I'm willing to risk." He gave her a small, meaningful smile. "And I've learned that even someone like me, someone who's built walls to survive, can let someone in. If the person is worth it." Her heart quickened. "I hope I'm worth it," she said gently. "You already are," he replied, his voice steady, warm. "But it's not about hope. It's about choosing every day to face the fear and the desire together." The words resonated deeply. Ava realized that their journey was not over, not the challenges, not the fears, not the unknown. But they had reached a point where trust had begun to root itself, where connection had taken hold. The desert had tested them, yes, but it had also given them a gift, the opportunity to face vulnerability, to embrace desire, and to choose courage over retreat. As night fell, they built a small fire together, the glow illuminating their faces. They sat close, sharing the quiet warmth, watching the stars emerge like countless tiny lanterns overhead. Ava felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for the desert or for the fire or even for the quiet night, but for the man sitting beside her. Daniel, with his steady gaze and quiet strength, had become more than a companion. He had become a partner in the truest sense, someone willing to face fear, to embrace desire, and to choose honesty above all. For hours, they spoke softly of hopes, dreams, and distant memories, their conversation weaving a bond that was both fragile and strong. The desert night seemed to cradle them, the stars reflecting the possibilities of what they could become together. Ava realized that the moments she had spent running from her past, seeking solitude, had all led to this, a chance to connect, to trust, to desire, and to be desired in return. Eventually, exhaustion began to pull at them. Ava lay near the fire, Willow grazing nearby, and Daniel settled close enough that their shoulders touched. It was a simple contact, yet it carried the weight of acknowledgement, acceptance, and commitment. Ava closed her eyes, listening to the soft crackle of the fire and the whisper of the desert wind. For the first time in a long time, she felt fully alive, fully present, and fully connected. Daniel spoke quietly, his words barely above a whisper. "No matter what happens, we face it honestly. That's the only way." Ava nodded, her heart full. "Together," she said, her voice soft but certain. "Together," he echoed, a faint smile touching his lips. And as the desert night stretched endlessly above them, filled with stars and the gentle rustle of the wind, Ava understood that their journey had reached a moment of resolution. The fears that had held them back, the doubts that had lingered between them, had been met with courage and honesty. Desire had been acknowledged, trust had begun to root, and a bond had been formed strong enough to face whatever the desert and life might bring next. The first light of dawn would come, bringing new challenges and opportunities, but in this moment, the desert had gifted them something precious: clarity, connection, and the courage to embrace both fear and desire. Ava felt a deep, unshakable peace settle over her, knowing that whatever paths lay ahead, they would face them side by side. The desert, once vast and empty, now felt alive with possibility. And somewhere deep within, Ava knew that this was only the beginning of a journey neither she nor Daniel could have predicted, but one they would navigate together, hearts open, fears acknowledged, and desires shared.